and previous regulations that prevented them from monetizing the NIL, I think we kind of knew it was coming, right? But you're right, Chris. You can't predict the direction that it will take. Our approach has been to be really thoughtful about how we attack it. And being in Nashville, and just with our brand and with our relationships, we think that our student athletes have great opportunity to monetize their name, image, and likeness. And we do have several student athletes who are doing that now. How we compete with it, when we think about how we want to support our student athletes, NIL and the resources to do it become part of our broader commitment to supporting all parts of their student athlete experience. So that's how we think of it. Of course, it comes up in recruiting. I can't speak to what other schools are doing, but certainly as student athletes learn more and more about it, I think recruiting is where you have to be prepared to talk about it, but I would also say retention. And being in Nashville, we think we have great opportunity, even with just some of the corporate relationships we have now. So it's an area where I think, you all know this, that there's no federal solution right now. So there are some NCAA sort of minimum guidelines, but each state is operating with its own set of rules. So it takes a lot of collaboration. I feel good about where we are right now, and there'll be more information coming, but it's an area where I think we've been pretty proactive, but we'll be able to, I think it will be an advantage for us when it's all said and done.
Would you like to see some federal guidelines, just to make sure everybody's playing by the same rules?
I think what would be, playing by the same rules, I think, is the key. So I think there are probably a number of ways that you could get there, but I do think that would take some of the guesswork and some of the mystery, some of the stress that people may have around this very big topic. It's like anything else. The world begins to calibrate and things will smooth out. I just want to make sure that we're proactive when it does smooth out, so it can be an advantage for us. I always think it's good when everybody's playing by the same set of rules.
There's been a lot of talk that kids go in the portal and then they get bought through NIL, and kids aren't playing for free. How big of a problem, when you talk to your coaches, do you perceive that? And then how do you guys feel about the ethics around that? Obviously, you got to play the game, but then you got parameters and guidelines to work around too.
Yeah, I think the biggest concern there is, and I think that this is a broad perspective, not just Vanderbilt, but I think in general, people do not want NIL to equal pay for play. So I think there is a difference on paper between the two. Everybody may not be experiencing it in real time as being different, but pay for play is not amateurism. And I think that we want to preserve amateurism. So I think the way that we talk about it is NIL being a part of modern collegiate athletics. And we recognize that. We do not believe that pay for play should be a part, not in a way that undermines the educational aspect and the amateurism aspect of being a student athlete. So it's I think your question is an important one, because sometimes those things are being considered one and the same. We have to give ourselves permission to talk about what we do differently, but I still say it's got to come back to the same core values that are why we got into this business to begin with. I probably shouldn't even say business, but why we got into the profession, which is about education.
You said a minute ago you thought eventually things will calibrate and smooth out. How do you see that specifically moving?
So, I know I can't predict, but part of it is that anytime you have something new, there's that initial upheaval, there's that initial uproar, and then things begin to find a cadence and calm down. So I'm also just speaking generally. How I think NIL will change, I do think that there will have to be some intervention. So we've got to decide, is that led by us as institutions or conferences? Is there a national solution? Is it federal? All questions that I don't have the answer to, but again, I go back to playing by the same set of rules is always, I think, a good thing.
There's kind of a school of thought that some would say it could help Vanderbilt because of the size of Nashville's market, and maybe a program like baseball where you've had a lot of big name players come through, but there's also the thought that it could hurt smaller program, but a program that hasn't had as much success in football, for instance, versus your Alabamas or Texas A&M, that have potentially more chess to really make an impact here. How do you view that? Do you view, because you said you think it could be an advantage for us? I guess my question would be why.
Yeah, because I think that the resources that we have access to, not just, so I understand why you asked your question, but I think it's, so one, the resources that are available here, but also because of the brand, so how strong the Vanderbilt brand is. In and of itself, students or individuals, just people being able to monetize their name, image, and likeness makes sense. So this idea that now student athletes can do it, that has, I would say that's been a long time coming. So as we think about modern college athletics and student athletes advocating for themselves, being able to benefit from a free market, being able to utilize the resources that are available to their non-athlete peers, if you think about that, this has been a long time coming. So I don't think that we have to just fundamentally change everything that we do, because what makes the brand attractive is still the case. Right, so I think that individuals now have access to do things that they didn't have the chance to do before. That's a good thing. I don't want to underreact, but I don't want to overreact, because I still say that what we offer is it is worth investing in. It is worth people being affiliated with. So that's why I think it's going to be an advantage.
I guess most recruits who would choose a school based off some NIL deal probably aren't coming to Vanderbilt. Like I guess a recruit would pick Vanderbilt for a different reason. Is that kind of where you're going with the brand?
Well, I would say, I know that kids make decisions for lots of reasons. So I would, your individual perspectives, I wouldn't want to comment on why. I do think that the young people that we bring into our community, they recognize that there is great opportunity here to do a lot of things, and NIL is just one of several pieces, right? So when we think about a holistic experience, it's one piece of that. I remember, I just thought this was so well done. I heard Clark Lee talk about this in an interview not too long ago. He talked about wanting, his football players to understand that coming to college, like your highest earning potential would not be recognized here. Like if we do what we're supposed to do, and we talk about this being a 40-year decision versus a 4-year decision, this puts you on a trajectory to maximize your potential in so many ways. You shouldn't peak at Vanderbilt. We're not in any way, not financially, not from a character standpoint, not from an athletic standpoint, not from an academic standpoint, that this should set you on your journey to maximize your potential, but the ceiling is not here. And so I think if you take that approach, I like how he was much more eloquent than I in saying it, but I'm trying to paraphrase. But I like what he's saying there, and NIL is, you can consider that in that approach too, right? So people who are making the decision to join us here recognize that there is a lot to this experience and the opportunity that you have to compete and win at Vanderbilt.
Transfer admission, never been easier. I think you've got to finish your last 60 hours at Vanderbilt. Is that correct?
So you're talking about for undergraduate transfers?
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
You have to establish residency, so I think it's a minimum of 60 hours.
Yeah, I know that's never been easy for any coaches. The portal's made it a bigger thing. How do you help your coaches with that? How are you helping your coaches with that? Where is it maybe not realistic, say past the 60-hour mark or whatever that would be?
So the 60-hour mark though, that's specific to undergraduate transfers who would then need to establish X number of hours in residence to then get a Vanderbilt degree. So the 60 hours is, in some cases that might affect somebody's ability to transfer, but that's really more about what you would be required to do here in order to then get a degree.
Okay.
So I think, like in your example, Chris, somebody that's maybe been an undergraduate at another institution for 3 years, that they might not be as attracted to coming to a place where then you would still need to do X number of hours in residence to get a degree, because it might take longer. So it just might not be as attractive. I think that, I'm not a coach, but I think a lot of the undergraduate transfers that we see, it's a little bit easier for them if they're younger, right? So you got a little bit more academic runway, you know what I'm saying? So maybe if somebody that has been a freshman or maybe a sophomore at another institution that then is going to transfer in. It's very specific to the degree, and it's also, just what their academic profile looks like. So that's a thing that can be hard for people to understand. It's not like a cookie cutter approach. So that's just specific to undergrads. I think that there is, we've had some sports that I think that have really benefited from graduate transfers. That too is different depending on the program. But I think that I know we've had some sports that have had great success there. So I think you just got to look at your team and figure out. And every coach takes a different approach. It seems to me like a lot of our coaches, without trying to speak for them, have decided that they might use the portal to complement gaps that they may see on their roster. Or, there's sometimes those gaps are not just athletically. Sometimes you just might need some older men or women from a leadership standpoint who may be a little more seasoned and coming with different experiences. Every program has its own needs, but we've always had transfers. The portal is different in that student athletes don't have to sit out if they use the one-time transfer exception. But, we do have to get used to it, but transfers are not new, right? So just got to think about for each program what the best approach is.
Since the portal's really become a big thing the last year or two, are there any specifics that you guys have made to your process, whether that's getting quicker answers for coaches or anything that you can point to that's done differently in the last year or two?
As a result of the portal? Or
as a result or happenstance, just anything that's changed with transfers in terms of Vanderbilt getting them in, getting the process faster, that sort of thing? Or anything on the horizon to make it easier for coaches?
Yeah, I think we worked really hard when coaches are recruiting transfers, we don't want there to be a delay in the process because they don't know if that young person is getting into school. So I think we've worked really hard, and not just by ourselves, with our campus partners. So I actually don't view that as a current concern. May have been a historical concern, but it's not a current concern. Now, timing does matter, so sometimes if you're really late in the process, it could just be the timing that makes it challenging. So I think that's a place where we've just had to be nimble, so in response to the transfer portal, because those transfers opportunities could come at any time. I'm trying to think if there's anything. The thing about the transfer portal is that a lot of times young people are making decisions quickly.
Yeah.
So one advantage that we have, the sense of community here, I think is very strong. And so that family environment, I think coaches work very hard to build a family environment. And so if you view the transfer portal as transactional, that's where, I think that you just have to be really thoughtful, because transactional can be the antithesis of what we're trying to build here, which is more about being more substantive and transformational. And yet, you have to be able to pivot and make decisions quickly. I'm not aware of a lot of roadblocks within that keep us from making those decisions. I think it's more about our coaches are very intentional about who they bring into the space because they value who they bring into the space. And I just think that's part of the responsibility that we all have. Did that answer the question?
Mm-hmm.
There's been talk around the league about how to do divisions with 16 teams, who's going to play who, the rivalries. Do you have any strong opinions on what you would like to see? I know nothing's been really settled, it's probably been discussed.
Yeah, it continues to be an open question. All I care about is growing our program. So no matter who we play and when we play them, that we're ready.
With the addition of those schools, does it help Vanderbilt?
Does it help Vanderbilt? Well, anything that helps elevate the brand of the SEC helps Vanderbilt. So I'm happy that we're the best conference in the country, and my sole focus, and I promise I'm not being flippant. I'm trying to be disciplined enough. Also for our coaches and for our student athletes to focus on the things that we can control, and that's being the very best Vanderbilt. And if we are the best Vanderbilt, we will compete and win. So it is an attribute to be a part of the SEC. I talk about that all the time. We're very proud of that. We need to reflect the excellence that this conference stands for and that our institution stands for. So anything that's good for the SEC, I think, is good for Vanderbilt.
Hawkins Field, what would renovations or improvements or anything look like, and would that include a deck over the infield?
So I'm trying to think when that was. I can't remember when that was where, I don't know, probably a Vandy United press release where we casually talked about the fact that fans could expect baseball stadium renovations. I think we mentioned tennis in there. So if we mention it publicly like that, that's because we have started the design process. So we have done that with Populous, the architecture firm that we're using out of Kansas City. And Coach Corbin and his staff are part of those conversations with us. When they get to a point, which I think that'll be relatively soon, where we can actually show those designs, it'll answer some of those questions. I don't want to get ahead of that, but lots of wonderful things are on the table to think about how we maximize our footprint over there. And also, I know I'm facing the camera, but I can see Hawkins, so I turned up. I think very soon we'll be able to talk about it to answer your questions. I just don't want to speak prematurely because there are a number of design options on the table. We are thinking about fans and their amenities, though, as part of that design. So I think people will be pleased with that.
Speaking of Vandy United, are you pleased with the fundraising efforts that have already gone forward and moving forward too?
I am. I mean, I'm really grateful because we've had tremendous support from fans and from alumni and donors, and we have more to raise because there are a lot of things we want to do. I will admit to you, it is a very ambitious plan. And when you haven't built something in a long time, there's just a lot you have to do. So I have been, I'm sort of cautiously saying, because I don't want the donations to stop, and I don't want to stop the support because it's been tremendous. It's been tremendous. I'm very pleased, and we have more work to do.
I'm going to circle back to the expansion. We saw the American Athletic Conference kind of, they're adding some people and making changes sooner rather than later. 23 is going to be their change. How much has that maybe been a conversation on whether that timeline gets changed or accelerated for the SEC's additions?
Right now, we're preparing for the conference to expand in 25. So that's what we're preparing on. I mean, there may be things that could change. We're not aware of those at this time, so we're preparing for
25. Start of football facilities and basketball. I think that's supposed to begin after the last football game. Is that correct?
I think that after the last football game, you'll be able to see it. But it actually has started. It's just that we have to be really careful to work around to make sure that we don't disrupt the field and the facility so we can actually play.
Sure.
This is that part where I too get frustrated because all of the non-visible construction stuff has to happen before you actually get to see the fun stuff. That has already occurred. If you're paying close attention, I think you will be able to see some differences during the season in that north end zone, but you will really be able to see it after we play our last game, because then we don't have to worry how people are entering and exiting the building and just trying to be mindful of traffic. Yeah, so it is actually technically already begun.
I guess you'll play 2023 with kind of a stadium that's in transition.
Yeah, so we have no plans of having to move out of the stadium, right, or plan an alternate location, but while the construction's underway. But you're right, that's a good way to describe it, a stadium in transition. Yes,
So I guess there'll be seat removal and some things like that are just necessary to get to the next phase.
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
About how many seats will you play with in 2023?
I can't say for sure because it depends on, ultimately in 23, specifically in 23.
Yeah, because you won't be done with it, right?
We won't be done in 23. We're going to remove seats as part of the south end zone, and then we will end up ultimately adding seats once the north end zone is complete. But the north end zone won't be complete until roughly spring of 24. So I'm not going to sit here and try to be a mathematician, but we're going to end up taking out approximately 10,000 seats as part of the south end zone. But many of those seats will end up being replaced. So I don't know, roughly down 10,000 probably in 23, but there may be some alternate things that we can do to try to accommodate fans temporarily. I think the biggest takeaway, to your point, Chris, is that we will be a stadium in transition, and that's where, I even remind our staff that there is a price to progress. So we may be working out of portables for a while and have to be really deliberate with how we communicate because we'll be spread out. There's a lot of grace that needs to occur while we're working with each other. So I would say the same thing to the fans that, pardon our mess and pardon our construction, but I appreciate the patience because the end result will be something that we're all very proud of. It'll just take some time.
When everything's finished, what's capacity settle in at?
I can't say yet for sure. It'll be a little less than what we have now,
Okay.
probably. Yeah, I don't want to give you numbers that are not correct, but we're not going to grow capacity. It will be less than the current capacity.
This building, I think, is going to go a lot of changes. What's this look like when it's done? When's it finished?
So the current scope of this building is will double its current size and would push out to the street a little bit more. It's currently 2 stories and is currently designed it will be at least 3, perhaps 4 stories. And once we get underway with the north end zone and the south end zone, it will help us dictate when this project can begin. So, the thing, I know I've said this before, but since we sit in it every day, it's top of mind for us, but it may not be top of mind for other people, that with the footprint being so tight, in a perfect world, you would just like to just tear everything down and just rebuild it right there at the same time. Like if money were no object, if time were no object, if displacement were no object, you wish you could just rebuild everything at the same time. The problem is that we still have to operate, right? We still have to work around seasons, schedules. You have to look at how people exit and enter. We have to think about utilities. There's just so many things. And again, we're going to do all of this at the same time because we have so much ground to make up that we just have to be thoughtful with how we stage everything. Because again, the space is what it is.
Yeah. What will be different about this building other than the size?
So it will look fundamentally different. So the exterior will be totally different. The size, that's important because it's going to allow us to be able to serve student athletes in different ways because we will actually have more than adequate space to do so, especially as it relates to student services and health and well-being resources. But I think people will really like just the design. I think the other thing is the efficiency, so the way that you'll move within the space. So if you're a student athlete or if you're a donor, if you're a visitor, if you're the media, we're trying to be really intentional about how people move throughout the space so that it's efficient and it makes sense. So that is a heavy lift just because of the size of this building. So that design is still underway. It's far down the line, but it's still underway. So that's what I'm prepared to say today.
You mentioned having to work out of portables. Would the teams maybe have to do that in season?
Well, so kind of this connects to the question that Chris asked earlier, the answer I was giving Chris earlier as we think about the timeline. So it is my number one priority here to minimize the disruption to the students. So if I have to work out of a box somewhere, I don't care about that. I do care about trying to make sure that our students have what they need as they move from space to space, and same with our coaches. So we'll try to, so I'm not going to sit here and say that all the kids will be operating out of portables. That would not be my goal. That would not be the goal. Somebody will be, but my goal is that we limit what the students have to adapt to. Because, they're still, that whole time, they're still competing. That whole time, everything else is the same. Like the expectations, their desire, the recruiting will just continue to get better. So, you're talking about elite athletes that will continue to be navigating through these spaces. So we got to make sure that they have what they need. So I hope they're not in portables. if they have to be, it's because that was absolutely what had to be done.
What's the future of the Legends Club?
What's the future of the Legends
Because
Club?
I don't
It's the
know.
home of Vanderbilt golf.
Well, I know that, but I believe, I may be wrong on this, but wasn't there like, with the part of the property, there was, I don't know, once it reached a certain value, that the school was forced to sell it. Is that not the case?
No.
Okay. They're not. So the North Course has not been bought, as far as you know.
Future of Vanderbilt golf, current and future home of Vanderbilt golf. No, and that's that's not correct.
Okay. There's no like overlay or I don't mean I'm not getting the right term, but I thought there was sort of a once the property reached a certain value that it could be developed for other things, and it's reached to that value now. Maybe not with the current mortgage rates, but it did 3 months ago, and so you do not have to sell it then, as far as
We're not selling
Okay.
it.
Okay.
No plans to do that.
Is there an overlay or something like that on there?
And I don't. There's some misinformation here, so
Okay.
I'm happy to talk with you
Okay.
offline
Off camera?
to clarify.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
We have time for a couple more.
Press box renovations. I think that came up somewhere recently. What's that
We
look
got,
like?
we
What's
got
the
a press
timeline?
release coming out this afternoon. Is
Oh.
that right, Alec?
You want to
I
scoop
don't want
Alan?
to steal my thunder. So, Chris, there is some information coming out this afternoon
Okay.
about suites in the press box.
Can you comment on it? I mean, my deadline's at 6.
Oh, I
And the
just,
press
I, just
release will
wanted,
come-
I just want to be respectful of our press release, which I think I commented there. But
Okay.
yeah, no.
Well,
yeah.
like for my purposes, that's in print. This is in
Oh,
front
I-
of the camera, and I won't run it until after the press release
Okay.
is released. If
That's-
you'd
that
like to
seems fair.
comment about these new suites.
What? Go ahead.
The release will be on just a few moments.
Okay. It's not going to be my deadline's at 6.
Yeah, I mean,
so-
I think what I,
Right
you know,
now, we can go ahead and
here's what I will say. So we're just being funny.
Yeah,
but
I know.
what I would say is that you know, we've tried to be intentional about each season and with each facility, our supporters coming back into the space and seeing investment. So that's really important because you've got these key large investments coming as a function of Vandy United, but in no way are we waiting on big projects to show progress. And so that's been important. So, you know, if we recap really quickly, and we talked about football a year ago and improved concessions and different graphics and I'm not even remembering everything. The berm area in the north end zone, or you think about basketball with the LED screens and the added ribbon board and the improved audio in the concourses, or you think about baseball with the lights and with the seats. Those are just examples where we wanted to, in short order, do things that were that showed investment. The next step, and it will not be the only one, but in football, what we're doing in the press box area and then what we're doing in the suites, it's actually supply chain has impacted some of it because we had to now put it into 2 phases. You will notice with the first phase, which will be completed by before our first football game, you will see a difference if that's a space you're familiar with, and then you will notice the difference. But that's just an example of, again, the continuous improvement that we want to make. We want to be at our best. So that's like every day, how are you putting your best foot forward? That's what we're committed to doing. So this is just an example of that.
A little off topic.
Sure.
Have you been asked or in any part of Nashville's pursuit of the WNBA team or the discussions for that? And what are your thoughts about that? Do you think that would be something that would be successful here?
Have not been a part of formal discussions related to that to date. I am 100% in favor of the growth of Nashville with the rise of sports. We're a sports town, so if that is on the table, then I and we would be supportive of that. And I think it would be successful if that were to come to bear.
Thanks, Candice. Appreciate it. Thanks everyone
Thank you.
for joining. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.